Okay, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning if you're in British Columbia. Welcome to our Recovery for All strategy session. I'm pleased to be here today with Al Weed and Debbie McGraw from our Canadian Lived Experience Leadership Network, and Zane Velji, who's our campaign manager for Recovery for All, and my colleague Randolyn, who's going to help us a bit later on with a live survey. So thank you all for coming today. Here's our agenda. I'm going to do a brief introduction, talk a little bit about Recovery for All, and a bit of our thinking about our plans going forward over the next few months and the next year, the next couple of years, I guess. We're going to talk. I'll turn things over to Zane, who will do a bit of a presentation about. Give you a bit of a sense of what the campaign strategy is. We'll open it up for questions, and then we're going to have a brief presentation from Debbie and Al to talk about the Canadian Lived Experience Leadership Network, their views on Recovery for All and how you can get involved with them. Then we'll open things up for questions and answers, and we're going to do a bit of a live survey, which is kind of a funky tool that we can use to get your feedback on some of the elements of the campaign and get your thoughts on the strategy going forward. So just a bit of housekeeping. So because we got a lot of people on the line, we're going to keep everybody muted. There is a chat function and a Q&A on Zoom. Most of you now have been stuck in COVID for a long time. You're probably zoomed out, but just so you know, there's a Q&A tab. If you have a question that you want asked in the question and answer periods, feel free to add your question there, and we'll make sure to ask it in the session and get you an answer. We'll also, there's a chat function, so if you want to say hello to your colleagues, introduce yourself, comment on anything in particular, feel free to use the chat function and speak with and share comments with other participants. We are going to post a recording of the session and on our campaign website, recoveryforall.ca. And also, this live survey that we're going to do requires you to be logged in on your computer. The address is right there, www.ztings.com/20k. Maybe Randolyn will throw that in the chat again for everyone. So while you're listening in, please open that up on your computer, and you'll be able to participate in the survey and help us figure out what our next steps are as a campaign. So just a little bit of background for those of you who are fairly new to the Alliance. Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness exists to end homelessness in Canada, and we lead a national movement of individuals, organizations, and communities working together to end homelessness. We have 5 main areas of our work. We have a national conference on ending homelessness. We've done every year except this one. We'll be holding another one hopefully next year in Toronto. We have something called Built for Zero Canada, which is a national change effort. We're working with 32 communities in 8 provinces around the country, focused on ending chronic and veteran homelessness on the road to ending all homelessness in Canada. We have a training and technical assistance program that helps communities and organizations with some of the training and coaching on technical aspects of ending homelessness, like Housing First. We also work with or support several allied networks working toward our shared mission of ending homelessness. So Al and Debbie are working in one of those networks, and so these are really allies and partners that we work with and support to make sure that really important elements of ending homelessness aren't myths, that key folks and vitally important folks, especially those experiencing homelessness, have a voice and a role in the policies and processes that impact them. But we work with a range of allied networks. And last and certainly not least, we do a whole lot of advocacy and lobbying, and now campaigning, because as we'll talk about, homelessness was created by policy. We'll need to fix some of those policies to end it. So really quickly, we're here to talk about Recovery for All, which is a national campaign that we've designed working with Zane and colleagues, asking Canadians to encourage the federal government to make bold investments in housing, homelessness, and income support to end homelessness in Canada once and for all. So the question becomes, well, it's great. We have Recovery for All. We have a campaign to get the government committed to ending homelessness and putting the resources in, but why now? Recovery for All began as COVID began hitting the country. We began talking about it and conceptualizing it in March, April. We launched it in May. And one of the things that became really apparent is that COVID-19 exposed the extreme vulnerability of homeless people. And, you know, there was a lot of talk, you know, and people are still saying, oh, I want to go back to normal. I want my, you know, want the old life back. But it came with a realization, and, you know, talking to Al and Debbie and others, that, you know, we can't go back to normal. We can't go back to the old normal where 235,000 different people are experiencing homelessness a year, where people are at elevated risk of death from a pandemic simply because they don't have a place to live. And that created a real important sense of urgency. But it also, we also began to think that maybe in this crisis there is an opportunity. And we began to see, you know, growing public support and even empathy for people experiencing homelessness. Everybody had to go home and stay home to stay healthy, right? But what about people that don't have a home? And that became quite apparent to us. And we're seeing some of that public support and empathy. One of the other things about crises is that you tend to, you know, throw away the rule book, set aside, as this quote says, you know, government will be setting aside the ordinary politics and conventional policy making for now. Now, watching the news and the shenanigans in the House of Commons, you know, perhaps they haven't got rid of ordinary politics entirely, but certainly that conventional policy making. And we begin to think and feel that some pretty big changes were possible. And we know that the government right now is planning for recovery as we speak, and they have been so over the summer. And right now in Canada, we just have a really unique political situation where we have a progressive federal parliament and a government that is largely supportive of our work. So all of those factors combined led us to this moment where we felt, you know what, the time is now. We can't go back to normal. Let's drive for the change that we need to in order to end homelessness. So I'll give you just a bit of a sense of the timing and kind of the immediate future over the next 6 months or so. So we launched Recovery for All in May, put up our website. We worked with a lot of our, I'll add, very quickly worked with a lot of our peers and other experts and researchers and folks like Al and Debbie to outline a 6-point plan. And these are 6 points that we felt were essential for ending homelessness. We also realized very quickly that what we're planning in that 6-point plan is a pretty big deal, and we needed to make sure that we had done our homework and understood the costs, worked out the math that goes behind these plans, and had some detailed policy recommendations for the federal government in order to end homelessness. So we called Steve Pomeroy to put together a report outlining amendments and changes to the national housing strategy that would be required to end homelessness. And we ran a poll. Interestingly enough, we ran a poll which, frankly, I thought we would get decent support for ending homelessness and investment in housing, but I was actually quite surprised at the level of support. And as the pollster outlined to us, Nick Nanos, he said, you know, I have a lot of clients that would kill for this level of support. So we have a plan that it's based in evidence, that we're confident would work, and it's based on stuff that we've seen in Canada before. We've done the math. We understand that not only we know exactly how much it'll cost, we know it'll be cheaper for the government to fix than it would be to ignore. We also know very quickly, we also know that our proposal would create over 500,000 jobs, which is a very big deal when you're considering a recovery investment. And we know the public is behind us. Over the course of the summer, and again, many of you will know my name because I have filled your inboxes with email over the last little while. But together, you know, so far, we have over 20,000 supporters. So 20,000 folks just like you have signed up to support the campaign, and we've sent what I consider an astronomical 400,000 letters to Parliament. Most of you, many of you won't know me, but I have a history, you know, as prior to working in homelessness more than a decade ago. I worked in, you know, in lobbying and advocacy, and I can tell you that there aren't many campaigns that I've ever seen that managed to generate that much volume and that much connection and that much interest. And all of that, all of those emails that I've been filling your inboxes with, and all of the emails that you've been sending, all of the tweets, all of the phone calls, all of the Facebook posts, all of that led in on September 23rd in the speech from the throne for the federal government to commit to ending chronic homelessness. And that quote there, that your advocacy made that happen, that is actually a quote from somebody that I spoke to in the Prime Minister's office, who said to me, you know, keep it up, you know, your advocacy, all the letters, all the emails, all the tweeting, all the Facebook posts, that made it happen, right? We've talked to a lot of MPs, and you know, the Liberal caucus, the NDP caucus, others are all talking about how important it is to invest in affordable housing now because you've made it that way. So now we got to think about what's next. We know, or we are expecting anyway, that the federal government is going to have a fall economic update. We don't actually know what that's going to look like. Often in these updates, they'll make some spending commitments, but it's really just a sense of, okay, here's the state of our budget as it is today. We are going to be pressing, as part of this campaign, we want to press the federal government to make a down payment on their commitment to ending chronic homelessness. So we want them to show that they're going to make a meaningful investment early, so that we can get this, meet that commitment to ending chronic homelessness. Now, they won't have their plan. They'll have our plan, but they won't have done their homework yet. They won't have made adjustments to national housing strategy, adjustments to reaching home, and figured out all of what they need to do yet. So they may not make the full multi-year commitment. In fact, I'm pretty certain they wouldn't. But we're hoping, expecting for signs that they're going to meet their promise, right? And one of those signs is the appointment of a National Housing Council. So that was promised in the National Housing Strategy Act. The reason a housing council is so important is that it is a first step in implementing the right to housing. It makes sure that the federal government has good advice on how they should respond to COVID-19 and how they should adapt the national housing strategy. And really importantly, they make sure that people with lived experience of homelessness are at the table making the recommendations, right? And it allows us to begin to dig into some of those systemic barriers that create homelessness in the first place. So it would be a really, really important signal that the government is serious. We're looking ahead as well to a spring budget, probably February, March at some point in 21. We're hoping then to have that, for them to begin to be making that longer term investment aligned with the 6-point plan. And we want to see how they're going to come up with a federal strategy to end chronic homelessness. So it's one thing for you to say you're going to do it in a speech from the throne. It's easy to make promises, but let's see, what's that old Wendy's that? Where's the beef? No, show us, that you're serious by putting some money to it. Let's put some plans in place. And while we're at it, we want to make sure that we can grow the Recovery for All campaign to at least 50,000 supporters. So I want to pause and really talk about, where homelessness came from and why, not just Recovery for All, but why a longer standing investment in campaigning and having a political influence is so important. Homelessness in Canada was created by policy. It started in the mid-late 80s with Prime Minister Mulroney on the right, but really exploded under Chrétien and Martin in the mid-1990s when they ended federal investment in housing and cut transfers to provinces, that cut welfare and downloaded, and that led to modern mass homelessness like we see it today. So if you're gonna end homelessness, right, we have to deal with the policy that created it in the first place, which means building a movement that has political influence. And before we got on the line, Al and I were chatting, and governments will only do really what they have permission to do, right? Because they got to get elected. Minority governments like this are much more receptive, I'll say, to feedback, or much more willing to listen. I think sometimes the majority governments, but even majority governments, need to get reelected. And I think, it became really clear that that the federal government will take measures, especially with austerity, that will impact poor people and homeless people, because they think they can get away with it, because there's not that political support that forces them to not do it, right, or forces them to take the action that corrects it. So that's an important reason why we need to build this movement. And Recovery for All is working, but it's really a first step, right? So we created Recovery for All, but it was really a bit of a test to help us understand what would it actually take to find people like you, bring you into the campaign and support, and how would you be willing to engage in politics in this way, to engage by writing letters and tweeting and Facebook posts and all of that stuff, and your evidence that you are, right, and people are willing to do that, and we can influence federal policy. So now we got to figure out how we make that live on a longer term and sustainable basis. And our goal is that, and we don't want to be the kind of advocacy stand where we're picking fights with people and we have these ugly disagreements necessarily. We'll pick a fight if we need to, but we can disagree without being disagreeable. And I think it's important that all political parties, and this is nonpartisan, right? So we're not conservative or liberal or NDP. We're here to end homelessness, and we want to make sure that all political parties believe they have to make housing investment in it and ending homelessness priorities. Like, we know we have to include that in our platform in order for us to get elected. All right. And importantly, and this is really one of the key principles for me that's at the heart of this effort, is make sure that people experiencing homelessness are heard and listened to. Right? How do we ensure that people experiencing homelessness, people have experienced homelessness, have a role, and the government's listening to them and taking their advice? I actually think that this group that we're going to hopefully build together can be a force to be reckoned with in politics. And Zane may talk a bit more about this, but 36% of Canadians have either been homeless or know somebody who has. 1.6 million Canadians. Imagine that. 1.6 million have experienced homelessness in their lives. Thousands more work in, donate, volunteer and donate to, or support organizations working in ending homelessness. Our goal with the Alliance is that by March this year, we and our allied networks have recruited 50,000 active supporters, right? People just like you and all of your friends and all of their friends and all of their friends' friends and anybody else that cares about this. And by March, our aim is that the Alliance and our allied networks have 250,000 active supporters. Let's put that into context. In Canada, the federal political parties all have membership. They all have active supporters. The NDP, we understand, in a good year has about 45,000 supporters federally. The Liberal Party, we understand, may have between 100,000 and 150,000 members. And the Conservative Party, who had just come through a leadership campaign, and leadership campaigns always boost the membership numbers, have around 200, 250,000. So if we can mobilize this many people, we will have level of support equal to the biggest of the federal political parties. And that is important when I look at our peers, Co-op Housing Federation and others. One of the things that makes them very influential is that they have all of these people that are connected to the Co-op Housing Federation, that are active and were willing to participate in the political process in order to achieve their outcome. And we want all of these people mobilized and active in order to make sure that we can reverse the policies that created homelessness in the first place and put in place the policies necessary to end it. So I'm going to pause there and put the question and answer, put the question open and answer any questions that come before I sort of pass things over to Zane. I'm just having a quick look here. So Johnny's asking, will you talk about the fact Indigenous people experience homelessness far and above any other demographic due to colonization and theft of land and resources by your people? Yes, absolutely. We know that Indigenous men experiencing homelessness are 11 times more likely to use a homeless shelter. In Canada, Indigenous women experiencing homelessness are far more likely, 15 times more likely to end up in a shelter than non-Indigenous people. Johnny, you're absolutely right. That colonization, that theft of culture, the removal from land or the disconnection from land, that absolutely huge factors in why Indigenous people experience homelessness much more than anybody else. And that's one of the reasons, one of our 6 points in our 6-point plan is to say you must have an Indigenous led urban Indigenous housing strategy, right? Absolutely have to have that. Nicole's asking how many active supporters now and who are the allied networks and how many are in BC? Now, I don't know the numbers of people in BC off the top of my head. Zane might know because he just remembers these things. Right now we have just over 20,000 active members. The allied networks, they're all on our website if you're curious, caah.ca. We've got Canadian Lived Experience, Leadership Network, Canadian Network for Health and Housing of People Experiencing Homelessness, which is a network of medical professionals, doctors that work with people experiencing homelessness. We have the National Alliance to End Rural and Remote Homelessness. We have the Canadian Shelter Transformation Network that's working with emergency shelters around the country to become housing focused. And we have the National Women's Housing and Homelessness Network to begin to dig into and change policy around women's experience of homelessness, which is unique and often hidden. So we're working with these groups, and apologies if I forgot anybody, but we're working with these groups to help them advance their aims. Damon is asking, considering the risk of election, I wanted to ask, how do you feel about outreach to opposition? How do you feel outreach to opposition parties has gone? Also, are there MPs from any specific party or parties that you recommend we try to connect with? We can talk about this in a bit. We've been reaching out to all parties in the House of Commons, probably honestly less connection with the Bloc, just because our campaign's been mostly in English. And mostly outside of Quebec, but we've been working closely with the NDP. There's a petition that Jenny Kwan, an MP, the critic for housing, an MP from the Vancouver area, has put forward, and the House of Commons should be introduced this week, by the way. I think it's important that we are talking to all parties. I think it's important to talk to the Conservatives, to talk to the NDP, to talk to the Liberals and the Green Party, as well as the BQ. I would right now. I think the really important players are those in cabinet that'll be making these funding decisions. People like Adam Vaughan, who is really the lead on housing. Also speaking to the opposition, because this is a minority parliament. But honestly, direct connection with your own MP is super powerful. It's super helpful, because ultimately, all MPs will have a voice, and they have that conversation. And when MPs are calling the Prime Minister's office saying, good grief, I've received a bazillion emails about housing, we need to do something about it so we can make it stop, that's important, and a huge help. So your own MPs are important. And sorry, Michelle Billick in the chat has outlined, I forgot, the Ontario Alliance to End Homelessness. So yes, we're also supporting the Ontario Alliance to End Homelessness. And importantly, I'm going to get it for this. So we have the Right to Housing Network that we're also supporting. Stephen's asking, what kind of cross-sector partners is the Alliance seeking to help promote and further RFA? Really, if you look on the RFA website, there's a number of organizations that have endorsed the campaign. I think the more the merrier. I think it would be important for us to reach people that are outside the housing and homelessness space that share some of our goals. But again, organizations in the sector, organizations doing the work of the sector, national organizations like our partners at Canadian Observatory on Homelessness and Away Home, Co-op Housing Federation of Canada, others I think are important. Also the mayors, so Federation of Canadian Municipalities and others are important. Norm is asking, many of us have relationships with our local MPs as constituents and grassroots advocates. Should we be meeting with them to discuss this? And will there be resources or guidelines for the message we want to present? That, Norm, is a brilliant idea. In fact, one of the things we talked about but haven't yet done is put together like a really simple kind of aide-memoire messaging document that we can give you. Calls, letters, emails to MPs are one thing, but there is nothing more influential with elected officials than a live person visiting their office, talking to them directly. Now, COVID may make the visits a little different, I don't know, but there's been tons of studies in the lobbying world, I'm sure, about what works most, and those visits are the most effective. So thank you, Norm, for that. Very good idea, and we'll certainly follow up. I'm going to pause there because there's lots of stuff to talk about, and I want to make sure we bring in Zane. So Zane, despite, I always tease him, he looks like he's 11. He's not really 11. He's got that, he's got the 5 o'clock shadow going, at noon. But Zane brings a ton of experience in politics, political campaigning, advocacy, campaign management, nonprofit communication and marketing. He works with a Northweather firm here in Calgary, and has done a ton of that stuff. He's also Mayor Nenchi's campaign manager, and you often will see his smiling mug and his now highly rated room. Apparently, highly rated room that apparently Room Rater is always rating the rooms of these commentators on these things. So I'm gonna stop share and turn it over to Zane. Let him talk to you a bit about what the strategy looks like today. Over to you, Zane.
Thank you, Tim, and I appreciate that. And no, this is not the room that got rated. This room would get a very low rating, according to the gods at Room Rater. I just wanted to share my screen here just so you can see this. Tim, can I just get a thumbs up from you? Can you see that in full screen mode there? Perfect. Wonderful. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Tim. And I just want to start by saying thank you to all of you for not just taking out the time today, but for being supporters of this campaign. Tim has alluded to a lot of what I want to talk about in terms of what our campaign strategy has been in this campaign. But I think it starts at a very basic level. And that basic level is that for us on this campaign, we wanted to employ what we call people power. You know, it is one thing to have Tim and his mug knock on the door of government as many times as he can. But our core campaign philosophy has been very simple. It's to say that, can we get like-minded individuals, wherever they may be in the country, whatever their background may be, to put their hand up, primarily in a digital and virtual way, and say, yeah, you know what? I want to see this change happen. And if we can do that at scale, what is the impact that we can have together? And you know, the policies that Tim has talked about that we've outlined are really about trying to ensure that government hears those, but government hears those from as many people as possible, from many what I'd call Canadians as possible, with their own everyday voices, their everyday networks, and the influence that you have that often we just do not realize how much influence we have overall. And that's kind of been the basis of our campaign strategy. So which lets me jump in very nicely to what is people power? And people power kind of comes from this concept that Tim and I have talked about around saying it's one thing to have a singular entity talk to government. It's another thing to have an entire parade of Canadians talk to government. And I often, when I talk about this, put up this quote from American President FDR, where he says, I agree with you, I want to do it, now make me do it. This is what Tim talked about in terms of permission. So knowing that we had this supportive parliament, you know, who's progressive and leaning, who has agreed to some of these items that we are advocating for, knowing that there is the appetite to do it, our job then was to showcase, can we get the like-minded Canadians across the country to say, yeah, you know what, I'll join in that cause. I'll lend my voice, I'll lend my influence, I'll lend a bit of my time to push this through, to create what we call that parade of all of us pushing together and saying, yep, me too, add me to the list, add me to the list. I want to do it as well. So what we're ultimately creating with our campaign philosophy was a parade of individuals who can talk about these important items to government, lend their voice and time to this cause. And I want to say thank you once again for doing that, because the success that we've had thus far has been based on that. As annoying as those emails may be, you know, they have helped. You hitting the submit button on that, I cannot emphasize enough how much that has helped, to telegraph to government, there's another person who cares. There's another person who's wanting to see this happen. And that at scale, which is what our ambition is, that force to be reckoned with, could really not just get us the right policies, but get us the right policies to ultimately do this and build a base of Canadians that can be mobilized and push forward for this as we go forward. Which brings me to the 4 basic principles of our campaign philosophy. Number 1 was, you have a voice. You know, more and more governments are recognizing that the voice of the individual matters way more than the voice of perhaps an organization or perhaps an entity than it ever has before. What do Canadians think about this? So that's a task we had, which was to say, we care about ending homelessness. We know there's a strong coalition of folks that do, that work in the housing sector, but can we expand that circle even more and say, can we find more people with voices? And that's the first part, is that government cares about voice. Number 2, you have influence. And I alluded to this earlier, but we have as individuals so much more influence than we realize, right? You know, when we talk about how we buy a product, where we donate, what we wear, what we eat, often it's the big brands or it's the big entities that try to tell us what to do. But even audit your own life. Who is it that you trust the most? It's those that are your friends and your family. Amidst all of the noise that we have, it's the folks in our inner circle that we have influence over, even if we don't realize it, a disproportionate amount of influence over. So if you start realizing and understanding that you have true influence, even if you put out a tweet, no one liked it, no one saw it in the world, trust me, just the way it works is that those around you have seen that. They may not have commented, that they have audited and seen, okay, this is something that Jenny cares about. This is something that Nicole cares about. This is something that Norm cares about. And if they care about it, maybe I should consider caring about it. So not only are you lending your voice and your time and talents to government, but you're also influencing those around you, which is so important. which kind of leads to the third point. You have networks. You have this group of disproportionately engaged people that listen to you, whether they're your family, your friends, your Facebook friends, whatever they may be. If you care about something and are starting to telegraph that, trust me, they will start thinking about it too, because they trust you, even though you don't realize it, more than ever before. And then the final thing I'll add is you represent what decision makers care about, right? What decision makers care about is Canadians who say, yeah, I want to be part of the parade. I've alluded to this already, but our whole strategy has been based on, can we get people who want to support this campaign and put their voice out there? And you have helped do that. You have helped us as an organization and as a campaign tell government, it's not just us. Look at the list of 20,000 people behind us. And as we go forward, look at the list of hopefully 50,000 people behind us who have lent their time, talents, and voice to say, we also want this to happen. Here's a few things I want to cover. Let me just quickly walk you through what we've been able to do thus far. Tim walked about some of the high level stats. I won't belabor the point, but I want to show you the scope of what you have been able to do, right? Our campaign started with us launching on May 26th. We put up a website. We were trending #4 in Canada. That was fun and nice. We got 1,000 supporters in the door in the first couple of hours. It was a great start for our campaign. But as we kind of continued there's a few key items, and Tim brought them up. The first one was we had that 6-point plan baked in, so that whenever government saw what we were looking for, it wasn't opaque. It wasn't something that was just theoretical. We had 6 critical things with subpoints that we wanted from the government. And what you helped us do was tell government over and over that, yay, you endorse this. This is what it requires to effectively end homelessness in Canada. From there, we did a report. This is the report that Tim alluded to, the Pomeroy report, which ultimately concluded that we can save billions of dollars by ending homelessness in Canada once and for all, a problem created by federal policy rather than managing it. We also costed out what it would take to make it happen. So not only do we have a plan, we costed it out. And then the third thing was the poll, right? We did a poll of public support, concluding that almost 3/4 of Canadians think that ending homelessness was urgent, telling the government that it was urgent, and over 80% of Canadians saying building affordable housing, especially in these pandemic times, is necessary and will economically stimulate our country. And what you helped us do was keep pushing that message to government, keep pushing these 6 points, keep pushing the fact that this is what we needed. So, we have you to thank that, we have these items out on the table, and you've helped us tell government why it's so important to adopt them every single time. And this is where we've led to. We have 20,000 supporters who've taken at least one action on our campaign. So this is active supporters. To answer Nicole's question, that's about 4,500 people in British Columbia. From that cohort that we have, about 6,500 people in Ontario. We've also sent over 410,000 letters to government with 18 different letter writing campaigns. You've also probably seen we created a bunch of videos. We had an introductory video. We had a couple of videos recently with individuals that were homeless. And we also had a video with thought leaders and those in community and those with lived experiences, including Mayor Nenshi, Mayor Don Iverson, Biff Naked, policy experts, and we have over 1.2 million views on those videos. And the purpose, let me just reiterate again, is that the fact we're producing these videos is one thing, but we're a grassroots campaign. So what you've helped us do is to not just allow us the capacity to create the content, which I know some of you have helped donate to help us create videos, which we thank you for as well, but you've also been so instrumental in helping us distribute this content as saying, yeah, like you should watch this, you should share this. This is something to take into account, and also getting it in front of government going forward. So using this philosophy, where are we going from here? And there's a few simple things I want to talk about. There's 3 things I think that are important, including I love Norm's point as well about talking to your MP or your MPP or your city councillor about these issues. And we'll get on that in terms of trying to create that guide of how to go about doing that. But here are a few things that we want to do going forward. The first one is we're starting something called the Recovery for All Action Team. If you see our emails, you may have seen this already, but if you go to recoveryforall.ca/action team, this is a group of individuals that we're trying to curate amongst our larger group who may want to put their hand up again and say, you know what, I might want to volunteer a little bit of my time. I might want to make some phone calls. I might want to meet with MPs. So if that might be you, we'd love to see your name on this list. If you go to recoveryforall.ca/action team, you can sign up for this. And we're going to start curating a little bit more content to this group to let you know what are some of the important things that you can help with in the short term. We're also going to start virtual rallies. We know government likes to see not just support in a theoretical letter writing standpoint. They obviously like to see it in person, but coming together, we want to create an ability for our supporter base to not just advocate and row together, but to get to know each other while they row together. That's really important in this, is that we want to build a community, right? Having 20,000 people individually rowing to the same goal is amazing, but having those people be able to know each other, get to know where they're from, why they're in the campaign, creates this level of enthusiasm and just collective community, which is just so important. We've got to have fun while we do this, right? And it's hard in COVID times, but that this will hopefully be not just an effective standpoint for government, but let us build a bit of a community. We want you to know each other. You're all putting your hand up saying this is something you want to do together. We want you to be able to do it with a team of folks, knowing that you're not on an island alone, that there's a bunch of people that across the country, regardless of where they're from or their background, that want the same thing as you. And that's really, really important. We also want to tweet our decision makers. We've been doing a bit of this, but we want to do more. We know to be very candid, our political decision makers check Twitter quite often, and we want them to know that this is something that you care about on social media. So we're going to be upping up our social media game as well, and asking you to tweet more, to share more. And I'll just say it once again, the tweets you've sent, the emails you've sent, the letters you've sent, they are working. And we can't, take our foot off the gas right now. We need to ensure that the sustained momentum continues, so we get the right investments and the right contributions that we need from government. Which brings me to my last slide and my last point, which is, thank you for doing what you've done. Thank you for supporting how you've supported. If you feel like this is something you want to help with, there's one philosophy, there's one sort of tool or instrument, or I don't even know what you call it, theory, that I want to leave you with, which is, if you come in today as someone who's supportive of this campaign, that's great. But if you feel like you want to keep your foot on the gas and help us continue this, the thing I ask you is to think of yourself as the campaign manager of your social network. And I'll repeat that again. You come in as a supporter and you leave today's session as the campaign manager of your social network. And that's just a slight philosophical tweak in your mind to say, rather than just being one person who's supportive of this, to ask who in my social network, my friends, my family, people that I know now have a disproportionate amount of trust in what I have to say, that my voice matters and that I have a network. Audit your social network. Who part of your friends and family right now should be part of Recovery for All that isn't? I ask you very simply, can you text them today the website? Can you send them a quick email with the Recovery for All website and tell them in 2 lines why you've joined it? If we start just doing that and keeping our foot on the gas and growing our cohort of supporters, just like yourselves, we have an ability to not just get another commitment, but to keep pushing on this as we know we can. So with that being said, I just wanted to round out by once again thanking all of you. This campaign would not be quote unquote successful to the point it has without you and your involvement. And I'll pass it over to Tim to see if there's any questions or if we want to move it on from here. Tim.
Right on. So why don't we just take a few questions here? So Maggie's asking, the places in Canada that say they have zero homelessness, what prevents other areas to have the same success? Short answer is nothing. The longer answer requires a bit more time, but I think the key thing is leadership and for them to decide to. One of the reasons, one of the recent letters that we've put out has been a letter from our campaign to mayors and getting the mayors and council to be engaged, because one of the things that we've noticed about ending homelessness anywhere in the world where they've had success is that they're strong local leaders, right? And then you have, Homer Trust in Edmonton and Mayor Iveson, or, in Guelph, you have this, you have the mayor and the strong community organizations making that decision that they can and will end homelessness. That to me is the really important starting point. And I think you'll see once we get a campaign to scale, I think we're going to be able and going to be turning our attention on some of those communities to say, look, we need you to get with the program. I think when we're talking about ending homelessness in Canada, we're talking about ending it one community at a time, one person at a time, one community at a time, with the support of senior governments. And so ultimately we have to get others engaged. Carolyn's asking, what are the plans to engage with Quebec advocates? We've had several conversations with advocates and leaders in Quebec. Haven't got to a point yet where we have kind of a Quebec campaign per se. We have been engaging supporters of Quebec. We do have a lot of our material in French, but certainly not all of our emails. That's just honestly a bit of a capacity issue right now. So we're hoping to expand and grow there, but honestly, we've been I'll just say this is a grassroots campaign, and we've been running it on a shoestring. I'll be frank. So it's really just a matter of resources and our ability to do everything in both languages. Norm has another good idea about what about writing letters to the editor and op-ed to raise awareness? Absolutely. I think I would say the more the merrier. And if we get in mainstream media is a great way of drawing attention. And for years, I've used it as a cheap and easy way, not easy, but a free way of communicating directly with political leaders. And every morning, everybody in Parliament and most officials at some point in the Canadian government will get clippings of the news on the issues that they're watching. And I know, for example, I've seen the clippings, so I know for a fact that the federal government is tracking the letters, the articles, the tweets, the Facebook posts about this campaign. So yes, letters to the editor, op-eds are great. And Norm is saying, have you thought about helping volunteers in different, I think Norm wants a job. I think Norm should be like, Zane, if Norm keeps this up, he might get fired.
These are excellent ideas, yeah.
Norm's saying, have you thought about helping volunteers in different ridings connect so that they can meet regularly and plan actions around meeting with local MPs? And if MP gets several constituents the same concerns, then they have to listen. You're absolutely right. I think that's something that we would be exploring with this action team, frankly, and perhaps through down the road. But where I'd like to get the government's the news today is all about people, the political parties in Ottawa playing games around chicken on who's going to call an election, who's not, and who's going to force one, who's not. But in an election campaign, if we had volunteers in ridings hosting events, having coffee meetings with candidates, hosting debates, going to debates, being active in person, that's super, super powerful. And so many ridings in Canada are decided by 1 or 120, 200 votes. If we can get 100, 200 people from Recovery for All or connected with this movement going to those and getting other people to vote, then we start, ridings start. Political parties are forced to listen because they have to in order to win those ridings, right? You see political parties putting out platform commitments to reach very niche, small segments of the population. We want to make sure that we're in line and they're listening carefully to what you say. So yes, Norm, you're exactly right. So I'm going to stop there. We'll have another chance to ask some more questions, but I'm going to turn it over to our friends Al and Debbie. I want to really quickly, though, just show their website. Stop share and share my screen so that you can all see the website. So Al and Debbie lead the Canadian Lived Experience Leadership Network. Both have been involved in and with working to support and push, I'll say, the Alliance over the last several years, and have taken the lead in pulling together the Canadian Lived Experience Leadership Network. And I'll turn it over to Debbie and Al to say a few words about the network, about Recovery for All, and how you can get involved with them. Go ahead, Debbie. I think you're on mute. There you go.
Okay. Can everybody hear me?
Welcome. Yeah.
Okay, I'm new to all this sharing screens and stuff, so bear with me because I don't know how to do any of that. I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we got to where we are now. And then Al's going to talk about the Recovery for All process, because this was a real process for us to get to where we are. Back at the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness Conference in Vancouver, 2014, I think it was.
Yes.
There was a group of us that got together and we started to notice some inequalities and stuff. And so we started to kind of approach Tim and be a little bit pushy. And, you know, just point out some of the things we noticed at the conference that needed to be changed. From there, we decided to form a group. We were made up of people from all over Canada. I don't remember how many of this, there was quite a few of us. I don't remember exactly how many. And the first piece of work that we created was the 7 principles of inclusion, because inclusion became very important to us of lived experience. It's about having those voices at the tables of policies and making changes, because nobody understands, and I think Tim made this point earlier, nobody understands policies better than those who have to live by them. And so we wanted to start seeing some real change. And so we created these 7 principles of inclusion, which can be found on the Homeless Hub website. And the goal is to start getting people lived experience voices heard and getting them listened to, and having them not only at the tables of local organizations, but getting them at the tables of provincial policymakers and federal policymakers. And without having that up to date, this has created a real unbalanced approach to ending homelessness. So we want that to change, and we're going to work towards making that change. Also, I forgot, I really need to thank CAEH and Tim and Michelle for all the support they've given us in getting to where we are today. So inclusion is a real vital piece in ending homelessness, and that's what our goal is to make sure that there's inclusion at every step of the policymaking process and in strategy decisions and so on. And I'm kind of lost here. But Al's going to talk a little bit more. If there's any questions, feel free to ask. Also, one of the things we're looking at doing is we're going to relook at our 7 principles of inclusion. And everybody's more than welcome to have a look at them. And if you have some feedback for us or some ideas or suggestions on something we may be missing or we can add, please let us know. We welcome any feedback. And Al's going to speak a little bit more on our relationship with the Recovery for All process. So I will turn it over to you now.
All right. Thanks, Deb. First of all, I want to thank Tim for since the beginning of the CAH conferences, he has always included a number of lived experience folks from across the country, which has been really an important step. And because of that, we found our first lived experience national group in Vancouver, as Deb was saying. It was really vital that we got a start, and Tim was responsible for that. You know, you can take the boy out of the street, but you can't take the street out of the boy. And you know, that's because the trauma and tragedy of homelessness you know, takes its toll, and recovery is not measured in weeks and months, but in years and lifetimes. And the only way that is ended is in placing a person in housing. And Recovery for All is the best platform and the best campaign to do that, and to really make a dent in ending homelessness. We as the Canadian Lived Experience Leadership Network have come through homelessness and come through recovery, and with us we bring the strength of will and spirit and the wisdom of lessons learned on the street, and that's why we're here today, and that's why, you know, we find it so important to support the Recovery for All platform and campaign. This is the strongest campaign that we have seen to date, and we'll probably see in our lifetime. 20,000 members already, and our goal as the Canadian Lived Experience Leadership Network is to go from, I think right now we have 100 and some odd members, to go to actually, and Tim and I have talked about this, go to 200,000 members. There are many folks out there who have experienced homelessness, and there's power in numbers, and with the Recovery for All numbers and with the Lived Experience Leadership Network numbers that are coming, we can be a real force in Ottawa. Nothing like the people's voice to change minds. And we support things that the Recovery for All pushes in their 6 points, and one is the meaningful implementation of the right to housing. Yes, we have right to housing in the constitutional legislation right now, but we need to really meaningfully implement that, because we are still seeing rights to housing and the human rights of the homeless trampled on. We need to elevate the right to housing there, and thank you for putting that in. And we also support the timely commitments to policy change and funding for homelessness. And we are seeing the government do that now, but the 1.4 million or $1 billion or thereabouts is just a drop in the bucket. We probably need 35 times that much, and the lobbying for that is really vital. And the 300,000 homes will end homelessness in this country. We've come very close to that, and part of that point is including eviction prevention in the National Housing Strategy. With COVID, with CURB, with the moratoriums ending on evictions, it's really important that a national eviction prevention policy that oversees or overrides all provincial policies comes into place. We will not have bills like 184 in Ontario. So everything about what the Recovery for All is promoting will end homelessness. We need your numbers, and if you think it's impossible, it's not. We are seeing a major shift in policy, as Tim has alluded to. We have our first ever national housing strategy that was implemented. We have the right to housing embedded in legislation. Who would have thought it? Who would have ever thought that right housing would be embedded in our legislation? Things are happening. We have a council, an advocate coming on board very soon, hopefully, that will guide the legislators and parliamentarians into making sound decisions on right to housing moving forward. Recovery for All is the platform. It is the campaign to end homelessness in Canada. And Canadian Lived Experience Leadership Network supports it fully, 100%. We will sponsor it to the nth degree. And I plead and I ask that everyone on the web today will consider doing that as well. The fact that you're on the webinar today tells us that you're there. So please move forward, call your politicians, your local politicians, and lend support for Recovery for All. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Al. That I think one of the things that we've learned, and Al, you were involved in the At Home Chez Soi project and
yes.
the Housing First demonstration in Winnipeg, and one of the things we've learned really clearly from communities that have had success in ending homelessness is how important it is to listen to that lived experience voice, and to listen to what people experiencing homelessness are saying that they need. And there's no better expert than the people that have lived that experience. So it's important. One of the key objectives of any of our campaigning is to make sure that lived voice is at the table and engaged. So I would encourage you to go to the website here and to sign up and join Al and Debbie. I think that the numbers, 200,000 members of the Lived Experience Network, I don't think that's a crazy number. I don't think that's impossible. You see a lot of other a lot of other causes getting those kind of numbers. And if you think about, 1.6 million Canadians have experienced homelessness in their lives, 36% of all Canadians have either been homeless or know somebody. I mean, that's a massive number, massive number. And if that happens and the network grows, the campaign grows, and we're able to mobilize these kind of numbers, there's no way that governments will get away with doing the same things again that caused homelessness in the first place without a fight. And it's certainly possible for us to begin to reverse those things. And if you look, I don't want to sound like I'm kind of tooting our own horn, but if you look at what's been accomplished with Recovery All to date, in Ottawa that the Prime Minister, the Privy Council, MPs are hearing from a lot of very, very big, very well financed, very well organized interest groups lobbying the hell out of them to get a piece of the recovery action, so to speak, right? But this campaign, with people power and a very, very small budget, right, have been able to get into that, get those commitments from the federal government where many others have failed, right? So you've done it. You've proven so far that it's possible. Now, and as I say to my kids, you give them an inch, they take a mile. Well, the government's given us an inch. They've opened the door a bit. Let's push through and get what's needed. So I will now just turn it over to my colleague, Randall. Randall, I'm going to stop sharing and allow. Do you like to share your screen or should I open the Z thing?
I would love to share my screen if I can.
All right, I will stop share. Randall will walk you through the survey. Ask all of you to open that survey on your computer, or phone, or whatever you happen to have open. And this is a way for us to get your advice and input on the campaign and the next strategy. So over to you, Randall.
All right, thanks, Tim. I'm just setting this up, and I know folks have been putting in the website and getting prepped, which I super appreciate. And so it should now be live for you. So thanks for being patient. The awesome thing about this software is that we can see how everyone's doing and see all your responses live so that you get access to the answers and that we're being transparent as well. And so just started with this one. Is it raining or snowing where you are today? And it's a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And that just lets me know that folks are here. Gosh, and it looks like it is a really rainy or snowy day. It's definitely rainy here in Guelph, Ontario, where I am. And so sorry for folks who are dealing with snow already. 83% having a pretty gray day. Oh, it keeps climbing. All right, so I'm going to flip to our first survey question. It's a multiple choice question, and we're asking folks how engaged you are with the Recovery for All campaign. So option A is that you're extremely engaged. You've participated in at least 3 ways. So those could be attending webinars, signing letters to politicians, sharing info on social media. And then we have option B, which is our very engaged folks, which seems to be in the lead right now. And you are the folks who have taken 1 or 2 actions. Option C is engaged. You're aware of the campaign, you visited the website, but maybe you haven't engaged in some of those actions yet. And no newbies yet, which is option D, not yet engaged. This is my first time learning about the campaign. So it looks like we have some very engaged supporters, which is great to see. As Tim mentioned earlier, we did a Nanos poll and we asked if folks have lived experience of homelessness themselves or have had a close friend or family member experience homelessness. And I think this is an important question to ask, as it really demonstrates what a shared experience this is, and not something that only a small number are experiencing, but that many have that shared experience. And it seems that way in this group as well, which is really, really excellent. It's so important to have voices of lived experience helping inform this work. All right, I'm going to move on to the next one. We're wondering, based on your opinion and what you're seeing and hearing, how effective you think the Recovery for All campaign has been in 3 different areas. So the first one is securing government commitment to end chronic homelessness. And you should be able to just click on a star from not effective to extremely effective. And then the second one, how effective has the campaign been in increasing awareness of homelessness among the general public? And last one, keeping you engaged and connected to the campaign. So we're getting mostly 4 out of 5 stars here, a 3.5 on the first one, which tells us that the campaign has been effective, but always room for improvement in getting to those 5 stars. All right. The next one is just an open-ended question, and just asking any other feedback, suggestions that we could strengthen the campaign. I know folks mentioned a few in the chat, and welcome you to plug those in here too, so that we don't lose them. I'm going to stop sharing my screen in just a minute and give it back to Tim. But I'm going to leave this question open. I know sometimes it takes a few minutes to pull your thoughts together and put them into that chat box. So I'll probably leave it open for about 15 minutes after we're done the webinar today. So feel free to put them in. You can also obviously feel free to reach out to Tim directly with things that come to you afterward. But thank you so much for sharing your input, and really great to see this work and all the awesome support we've had from folks. All right, Tim, so I'm gonna stop my share and give that back to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Randall. Thank you, everybody, for plugging your answers in and continuing to do so for the next few minutes. We got a minute or two if anybody has any questions. Feel free to add them to the Q&A panel, or suggestions that you want to add to the chat as well. So just to let you know, as I mentioned earlier, right now, for the next little while, our focus is really going to be on getting to the November fall economic statement. We presume that there's still going to be one. You never know, these things can change. But the government has made that initial promise. Now we have to keep up the pressure and make sure they put their money where their mouths are, and start getting the resources into place so that that commitment can be made real. So you're going to be hearing from us quite a bit over the next few weeks. Apologies in advance for filling up your email boxes. I don't know, Zane or Al or Debbie, if you had any last words you wanted to share. Zane?
No, thank you, Tim, and thank you to all. We'll keep going with the campaign. Thank you for all your support, and thank you for your ideas. I think this has been as useful to us, and hopefully we can implement some of those suggestions down the road as we expand and head towards trying to secure this commitment from the government. So thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Al, Debbie? Sorry, Debbie, you're both on mute.
Has anybody noticed that through this whole thing, my name is Al Weeb?
Yeah, is that right?
We don't think any less of you for it.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Tim, Michelle, and for helping to cobble things together and bring together Deb and myself to start the Canadian Lived Experience Leadership Network. It's vital, and you know, we're at a tipping point in time here where we can make a difference with COVID, with CURB, and everything else, and it's really important that the Lived Experience Leadership Network is part of the platform and the campaign, Recovery for All. But thanks again, and look forward to working with you in a big way in the next few years.
Thank you, Al and Debbie. And my colleague Michelle Billick is here. Michelle has been, she's our national field organizer and has been working to support Allied Networks and helping Al and Debbie get us organized, which is terrific. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for joining us, and thank you to Randolyn. Again, I put my email in the chat. Feel free to drop me a note if there's any other suggestions or any other comments or questions that you have. Happy to chat. Apologies if I'm a little slow getting back to people, but I do read all of it. So thank you very much. So I think we'll end there. Thank you all very much for taking the time and joining us, and thank you very much for your support of the campaign. We've managed to make a pretty huge leap forward in ending homelessness in Canada. As I said earlier, we can't go back to normal. We can't go back to a place where it's normal to have people dying on the streets, out in tents and parks, and at risk of death from a pandemic that for no other reason than the lack of a home. And we know how to end homelessness. We know we have the advice of great people like Debbie and Al. We know that it's possible. We've laid out an affordable and achievable pathway to ending homelessness in Canada through Recovery for All, and now we just need to push government until we get the resources to get the job done. So I want to thank all of you. We'll put a recording of this session up on the website, and we'll certainly have another one in the near future to give everybody a chance to give us their feedback and ask questions. So with that, I will wish everybody a warm, safe, and happy day. Please take care of yourselves and stay safe. We'll be in touch again very soon. Watch your inbox. Thank you, guys. See you all soon.